And it's my pleasure to actually welcome the panelists also either on stage or online, because indeed we could be, I assume most of us or all of us here in this room and following online believe in the importance of innovation. Innovation is dear to all of us, it's really in our hearts, but we could talk and talk and talk and talk. That's not the point. We want to make it happen. And from that perspective, it's actually important that we remember what the key frameworks are that work to make innovation happen and be realistic, usable, to be at the center of everything that we do and not that kind of small hub of innovative people that try to influence but don't manage to make the change happen. This is actually what we're going to try to discuss about during the panel discussion. So with no further ado, once again, I welcome first of all on stage Severin, who's going to be joining me physically. Severin Klingler, the Managing Director of ETH Media Technology Center. Welcome. Also, we have online Jean-Pierre Besnard, Program Manager at OFF7 and Project Manager at Ouest-France. Bonjour. We also have with us Professor Johanna Björklund, Project Manager at Wara Media and Language and also co-founder and CTO at Adlede and Codemill. Welcome, Johanna. And we have also online Sarah Geeroms, Head of Future Media Hubs, Innovation and Strategic Partnerships at VRT in Belgium. Welcome, Sarah, as well.
Thank you.
Perhaps it's a delight to have people from so many different places and backgrounds together for this discussion. Perhaps I can start by framing the question about innovation. So obviously we like innovation, but where does innovation stand today? Is it just something that continues to be a trendy word that some people like to talk about and try to like to believe that it's still relevant? Or is it something that is actually not managing to make an impact? Do we take the realistic approach and define together what is innovation with us? First of all, Jean-Pierre Besnard, tell us a little bit about what your role is, what innovation is for you, where you work.
My name is Jean-Pierre Besnard. I work for Ouest-France, one of the biggest newspaper in France and one of the most important digital platform in France also. And my job is, I've got two jobs. One job is to operate projects like everyone. I've got my own business and also to help Ouest-France to innovate by open innovation. And I'm responsible for startup accelerator that every year accelerates between 5 and 8 startups. Do you want to know more? What do you want some information?
That we could use to relate a little bit to what you do is see an image that you've prepared about the place where you make innovation happen.
Yes, this is the room, the newsroom actually, where workshops happens. I wanted to show this because it shows that innovation is a real part of the core business of the newspaper, the media. So it's not something beside. It's very important. It's considered very important in the company.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jean-Pierre. And also to help us a little bit understand what you do and your role with innovation, is there any success story or failure that you'd like to share with us?
There's no particular startups I would mention. The thing I would prefer put the focus on is the success element in the organization. We have changed our mind. We are organized on a project approach. So it means that each time there is an innovation and something new, we are already in position to develop or integrate it. That's very important. Second is I am quite lucky to be very close to executive in the company. If you have to decide to mobilize, to involve people, you must be very close to the people who decide because you have to they have to decide to embed people. One other thing important is that innovation is by startups is not beside but inside. We always, when a startup is chosen, we always associate it with 2 internal coaches, and these coaches are really impacted in their own roadmaps with the integration of the solution of the startups. Those key points are really, really important because the accelerator now is seen as a part of the company and not something beside. And that's one. That's the most successful part of the accelerator, I would mention.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. You've already mentioned some of the elements that you think make innovation actually happen and be realistically a success. We'll come back to that after everybody has introduced themselves. I'd like now to give the floor to Johanna. Johanna, welcome to you as well. Tell us a little bit about what innovation is to you, what your role within innovation is, and your companies.
Okay, so to me, innovation is practical and holistical solutions to practical problems. So meaning solutions that work not only in a technical sense, but maybe also in a business sense for a problem that actually needs solving. And for me, this will always be relevant whether or not we call it innovation or not, because we never run out of problems, and also solutions that used to be working cease to be working. So we see with the environment, for instance, that behaviors that have worked until now are no longer reasonable because we have finite resources. So when it comes to innovation, I'm a researcher at computer science at Umeå University, so I do like proper foundational research, a lot of mathematics. But I also have 2 companies. We have Codemill that does web-based production tools for big media publishers. And then we have Adlede that does, well, we can call it AI for placing advertisements in good media contexts without using personal data. So my role there has sort of been to be as a middleman between the academy and the universities and try to get results out. And for this reason now I think I've been trusted with this national research arena where it's my job to get researchers and people from the industry to meet and to learn from one another. So a lot of just trying to stimulate innovation.
And bringing people together, that's another element. We'll also get back to that. Perhaps you'd like to also show us, Johanna, I know you prepared an image that would help us to relate. So how is your environment, where you work?
Umeå, that's quite close to the Arctic Circle. That must be a terrible place to live and work. But it's actually very nice also in the winters because we have proper winters, so lots of snow, and we had Arctic light, and also we have like very nice and creative environments. We tend to stay inside a lot of the time in the winters. Okay, so that's one page, and then my success story is the next slide. So if we go to that, can you see that?
Yep, we see it.
And this is an event that we arranged in Åre, so that's a ski resort. And that was about bringing people again from the industry and academy together, and we invited people on a personal level. So we took people that we knew were creative and interested in collaboration and brought them together, and it turned out really well, if I may say so myself.
Thank you very much, Johanna. We'll get back to some of those elements in a minute as well. Now I'll welcome on stage and on screen Sarah, please. Sarah, tell us a little bit also, please, about your role, your work, how you relate to innovation.
But for me, I am leading an international network, as you know, of commercial and public media organizations that exchange on innovation and that collaborate. And regarding the question what innovation means to me, I've been talking to a lot of companies, nationally and internationally, and it really depends on what a company is expecting from you. For some, it might be more about doing progressive research. For others, it's more about doing fast experimental things. For some others, it's more about challenging the internal teams to change their roadmaps, or just, buying, building, and so on. Now, for us at VRT, we have like sort of an innovation office with totally different profiles, from researchers to prototypers, startup experts who are working on all kinds of topics. And then we have some innovations where we put people within the different departments, like, for example, on disinformation. And then we have an innovation board as well, at this moment internally, that is really helping us with all our ideas and long-term strategies. And do you also want me to elaborate on the successes?
Please.
Okay. So the biggest success for me has been that we created from a work package within a Horizon 2020 project called Media Roads, an entire community that is really actively exchanging and building projects together, and that is really working. So that's pretty cool. And it also means that when you start research projects, that it really can lead towards bigger things, which is for now. I mean, we have a team of 4 or 5 people that are continually striving for impacts, in the whole of Europe. And it can be from startup projects to more inspiration to gaming stuff. But I will give some examples later on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Sarah. And we also have an image to relate to the space where you work sometimes, or some of the projects you've worked on. Yep, we see a picture. And another picture.
This
is
where we
Sarah.
are seated.
Thank you very much. We'll get back to this, actually. We'll get back to the question about spaces that are kind of, in theory, helping us to be more innovative or more creative, or is that actually just, a trend and innovation is more of a mindset? We'll talk about that in a minute. The last person is actually here with me, and it feels good to also see you in person, Severin. So can you please tell us what your role is and what's your relationship with innovation?
Sure, I'm happy to. Yeah, welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm the Managing Director of the Media Technology Center at ETH. I think in many ways we're the sister initiative of IMI in Switzerland a little bit. I think we have a more technical focus, at least in the beginning. So we have a team of researchers, currently I think about like 13 people, working on mostly technological projects. So when we're talking about innovation for us, it always comes from a technical point of view at this point, but we're also, dear to our heart is really making the connection to design and journalism at this point. So I think at the intersection of those things to conceive mostly also new ideas for content, for products in the media space, I would say.
Mm-hmm. That sounds perfect, and we'll also obviously get back to a little bit more of detail on that. Do you have any success stories or failures to share with us?
So since we heard so many successes, I'm happy to share a failure. I think especially as a computer scientist, right, the transition, we were all computer scientists, right, the transition into this Zoom world, I would say was quite easy for us. None of us struggled too much with online meetings, but we also in the same year, we wanted to establish a sabbatical program where we wanted to bring in partners from like people from our media partners to actually work, with us for a couple of months on specific projects. And, of course, we had to do this online, which was not possible at all. Basically, people would get swept away with daily businesses without the physicality. So maybe a lesson learned that this physical space for innovation is also quite important.
Yep, and perhaps you can actually see some of the images that you put together to show us and help us to relate to your world.
Yeah, what you see is a bank offices, actually. So we just moved, ETH rented some former bank space. So I think it's important to have a place, but I would say it's not so much important, how it looks like. So we have this nice open space that you can see below. It's quite empty due to COVID, but imagine 15 people sitting there and talking to each other.
Mm-hmm. And an anecdote, actually, Severin, when we were preparing for this discussion, you actually mentioned that some people, when they come to your spaces, they seem to be disappointed because they expect something like kind of
Absolutely. Google
spaces, creative spaces, people playing, a playground, and actually it's just a traditional setup. What's your take on this? You mentioned this actually also on your failure. What's your take? Do we need to invest in certain, kind of trendy, creative, playful spaces in order to make innovation really happen? Or do you actually think that innovation can happen anywhere for as long as the right attitude and financial resources are there?
I think it's the latter. I think for me, it's much more about, how people are given the freedom to work or to think about new ideas, or, that not, that kind of these ideas can happen, that you have the space to talk to each other. But for me, it never was, about how the physical space looks like, more that it facilitates, a meeting or a conversation without maybe disturbing everyone else.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask Johanna what her take is on this, because also when we were preparing for the conversation, she had a few thoughts on this particular aspect. What do you think, Johanna?
Well, my thought then and still is that a good environment is as free from distractions as possible. So I like to keep clean desk and have peace and quiet, and so that I can really sit and think without being disturbed. But I do also think that it is important to interact with other people, and this has to be done with a great degree of humility, so no prestige. And then if you have signals in the environment saying that we have a playful atmosphere here, then that signal might help. But if you already have the kind of relationship with that person, you don't need that. So no distractions, and then also this playful mood when you interact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for speaking so slowly. We do have an echo here. Yes.
I'm sorry about that. Apologies. Hopefully you can still follow the conversation. It's hybrid world. We all look forward to being together in person, I'm guessing. But thank you anyway for keeping up. Hopefully we can continue understanding each other. And now I'd like to ask Jean-Pierre about another aspect that he mentioned. You mentioned, Jean-Pierre, that one of the elements that help you succeed is that you sit closely, or you work closely with executive profiles within your organization. And you mentioned that it is actually crucial. Where does innovation sit today? I'm going to ask you first, Jean-Pierre, in your case, but in general, what are our experiences? Is innovation still something that happens within a small hub that kind of, comes with creative ideas, but is still somehow isolated? Or is innovation more and more close in reality to the center of our companies and to strategic profiles and executive profiles within our organizations? What's the trend today? Starting with you, Jean-Pierre, and any thoughts?
First of all, there's no one in the company has innovation title. The executive and the top of the management says that innovation must be everywhere. So it's a first point. Then innovation is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. We try to identify a few axes to find our startups, and that's the way that we impulse innovation in the company. I don't know if you want to have example of what we are looking for in innovation. I could talk about it later, but the point is that innovation, no one has title about it. It must be. I am in certain degree a door to get more innovation by startups, but I'm not the only one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Sarah, I'd like also to hear your thought on this, because you actually work closely with many different actors in the media sector and other sectors. I'd like to see what you see as a trend, because we all know that we've been saying innovation needs to be everywhere. But realistically, what is the trend today? Where does innovation sit at organization level? Sarah, I see Johanna online, which is good, because anyway, Johanna, I'm going to ask you later. But Sarah, I wanted to hear what you see as a trend, and then also within VRT, how closely is it to strategic profiles and executive profiles realistically?
Yeah, so first of all, the trend that I see is that everyone is doing it differently. And you're saying that the things are happening at all different levels. What I've learned over the past years is what really works if you want to be innovative is that you have, first of all, an open mentality, and then also a safe place to explore and to do some small, fast, pretty cool stuff. So for us, the location is really important. get back to what was said earlier, we are really located very near to the public corner. A lot of people are passing by. There's a lot of buzz, obviously not the last 2 years, but in general. And it really helps to talk to people, get a conversation going, check out what they're working on, see if there are like common goals. So that's one thing. And then the third thing that is really important that I've learned is that you have different levels within your community that are willing to work on innovation. So that goes from CEO level, middle management, and also teams that are working on it. And if one of these is not like agreeing, then the progress will be much more difficult. And for us as VRT, like I said, we have then this innovation office that is centralized, a few labs on the topics that we find really relevant to work on that are aligned with our strategy. So these people are then within the departments. And then the third thing which is the innovation board. This is made of all people from the different units within our company that set strategic goals within their departments. So we are continuously talking to them to see where we need to go and then challenging them and the other way around. That's clarifies.
Thank you, Sarah. And that actually sounds to me like kind of the ideal world. We also know that it's not always the case. To be realistically speaking, sometimes innovation still sits in an isolated manner. So now let's talk a little bit about how to make sure when the innovation profiles or teams are not necessarily closely related to heads of strategies, strategic goals, and executive profiles. How do we still make that relevant? Perhaps, Johanna, now going to you. You see actually a trend in investing in, I don't know, many artificial intelligence, let's say. Is that actually a wise decision? Do we make a wise decision when investing in something that we think will take us farther, but then we don't necessarily see the industry embracing fully? What's the right balance? What's the right decision? How much risk or how to actually make it work?
A very good question, especially when it comes to AI. I think we should maybe join effort. So I think that the industry maybe should have a more short-term view and take the technology that exists and try to bring it out and make it create value. And then in the academia, we can take maybe a 5 or 10-year perspective and do things that are higher risk. And then, of course, there is a trade-off between exploitation and exploration. In that, I mean, we have to spend some time on things that we know that work, and then sometimes on trying to learn new things. And this latter part is risky because typically it doesn't pay off. Most things we try is not worthwhile, but then the few things that actually works can make a great difference. As whether or not, I mean, the money that goes into AI now is the best use of that money, it's impossible for me to say, because they could also maybe feed people that are starving or buy more hip replacements. So I don't know, I mean, what will benefit human best in the long term. But I think what we can do is that, given the money that goes in, at least we try to make the best possible use of that money. So sorry for the non-answer.
No, but it's already a direction, and we'll continue to go into detail on that. I just wanted to go now to Severin to understand, how do you decide what to put your money on, what to invest in, what you put money and efforts on? It's, you know, is it a, you see what's going to happen in 5 years from now, let's explore, or actually do you go to users and you understand they need this now, let me try to explore specifically this. How do you assess that?
So it's a very good question. What we're doing at the moment is, for all our projects, they're coming directly from our partners, from media companies. We're not going as far as we're talking to the users, but typically we're talking to journalists, to people working with video editing software, to kind of understand some of their pain points. And what we're trying to do at MTC is then translating this in a bit of longer term vision, how a lot of the things are AI related for us, how we could solve this. So it's for us, it's really important to find this balance and between, relevancy for academic research, that it still has, since our framework is within ETH, but that it's very relevant in terms of the potential outcomes. And I think in terms of the time span that was mentioned, we're sitting in between something like typically 18 months to 3 years that we're looking to have something, but this might also change in the future. But for us, it's really relevant that, from all partners we get support for those projects. Make sure they're relevant, at least on some level, right? It's always hard to, for us at least, to reach the users at this point.
How precisely do you make sure they are relevant? What are the specific processes do you use for that?
So I think it's mostly so I would say it's two things. First, in project selection, we make sure that project ideas are really surfaced from within the companies. We're running workshops. We're getting ideas and talking to individual people in different positions, from more technical people to more as I said, like maybe in the newsroom. So this is one aspect, being careful about what to select. And then the other thing we're trying to do is, during these projects, we have very regular meetings with everyone involved to really try to still align these. Even if it's a bit of translation, for us it always feels a bit like translating, I think, in both ways, right, between academic research and more industry aspects. But I think this is where a lot of great ideas are actually coming from during the process of the project.
Thank you, Severin. That does give us some hints on how to invest in relevant topics now to kind of explore. But then perhaps I go now to Jean-Pierre, because you mentioned earlier integration, relevance in what topics to choose, where to invest, but then also how to make, relevance is also how to make sure that the target users for which we do explore those topics actually use what the innovative projects that we've worked on. You talked specifically, Jean-Pierre, about integration. How do you actually make that integration happen on a concrete basis? Tell us a little bit how you make sure that all of the innovation projects that you invest in then are actually embraced by the teams as long-term projects or products.
We've got a selection process to decide which startups we'll work with. And first of all, if we propose to internal coaches to follow the startups for 8 months that last the program. And if we don't find any internal coach, or if no one wants to can give time to follow the startups, we don't select the startups. So there is an engagement from us to participate and integrate the solution. That's one point. The second point is to ensure that when the internal coach has accepted to follow the startups, is to ensure that all the work done to follow the startup is not an additional time, but an official time in his roadmap. So it's people work not thinking it's additional job, but it's integrated in their daily job, daily activities. So that's very important. And then I would say that all 4 months we present to everybody involved in the startup accelerator all the results and discuss if we continue or not, and try to find what has to be improved.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. And another question for you that actually comes from the audience. It's going to be for several speakers. And thank you to the person who sent the question. What are for you the biggest difficulties that you face during the innovation process? Whether that is in the moment of the end of the cycle or at the beginning, getting the funding, convincing your stakeholders. What are your biggest difficulties or challenges?
What's most difficult? Finding internal coach is not a problem. Luckily, the program is well seen, so people are very enthusiastic to work with. What's difficult is you don't know when you start the collaboration if it will produce value or not. Sometimes you cannot connect technically solutions or products. Sometimes you have a huge amount of work to integrate it, and it produces something very narrow. It's quite difficult to anticipate if it will work or not. So you have to take the risk. We have no financial problems or discussions because we don't talk about it to startups. We don't invest at the beginning, neither at the end. So it's not a difficulty. We have not problems and discussions about this. We have no problem either on geographical point of view because we don't ask our startups to come to Brittany where we work. We let them stay where they are actually working. It could be, we could think it's a problem, but it's actually not. And if I try, maybe I will find another difficulty if you later.
No, definitely, it gives us enough. I take what you said about the difficulty of taking risks. That's good. I actually also took, I'm not going to elaborate on that now, but I also took, it's I think one of the first times that I've ever heard that I don't have any problems with the funding. That's actually sounds really good, and I'd like definitely to hear more about that later on. Perhaps I'll go to Johanna now, also to ask the same question. Johanna, what do you think is still the biggest challenge or difficulty in the innovation process?
If we talk in a particular case of research projects, then often there is no initial sense of urgency because the project period might be quite long. And especially if you're working with startups and researchers, then they have all the things that are like more important for daily operations. So researchers, they have their deadlines, and startups, they have like always something on fire. So maybe it can be a good idea to create an artificial deadline fairly on into the project with an external observer just to force you to get going, to get past that initial awkward phase. And then another thing is, of course, that if you have a new project team, so you have some people from the industry side and some from the research side, then, I mean, it's by definition not a functioning team because they don't know each other. They haven't gotten past these initial phases when you try to form a functioning team. So I think it's nice if you can bring them together, like in the physical world, in a real workshop, and have them hang out and socialize for, 2-3 days. Because then they will also have an obligation to one another. They will know each other as actual people, and then I think that they will make an effort to help each other make the project do progress. So create urgency and get the team building going early on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Johanna. That's a very good point as well. Now I'd like to go to Sarah, because Sarah, you actually have built several networks of innovators and you bring them together as a facilitator. What do you think are the key elements that help you influence the different stakeholders to come together and actually collaborate?
There are a couple of things, and it's not only for the innovative groups we're working on, but also for individual partnerships, and these are always recurring. So the first one is you need to be willing to share, because often if you don't want to share yourself, then other people won't share neither. And then what we also try to do is look for the win-win, and it should not necessarily be the same for each of the companies. For example, you might have a different focus and different values as your competitors, but often it's just about thinking maybe they have a stronger budget, but we, for example, have then this bigger network, and then we just try to see where the win-win is, and we try to match these together. So we try to think a little bit out of the box. And also we try to be very clear if we collaborate on what the business cases are, the KPIs, who will have which role, to be sure that these things are really well written. And then what we also learned is that we work with baby steps, because often we have these bigger things in mind, but then we're blocked for some reason by, let's say, for example, higher management somewhere or funding or whatever. So we start small and then we try to prove our point with a smaller project. And then, for example, afterwards, when we've proven that it works or that at least it creates value, then we are going to look for, let's say, bigger funding or more approvals internally, and so on. For the rest, what is also very important, I think, in this networking building is that you not only invest time in the formal part, but also in the informal part. I really have noticed that is very important if you have like a more difficult issue, that it's easier to go through if you know the people very well. And then just, collaboration takes time. So you need to start over and over and over again. And then often adapt as well. Definitely with us as a public broadcaster, there are sometimes things happening on a political level. So then we change, we adapt, and we try to look to the new win-win situation with the other companies. So it's really all about trying over and over and being transparent. If things doesn't work, then we just mention it, because maybe next time we will need those partners again. And then it's good that you have like a clear play to start with. So these are some examples. I can continue, but I guess this gives you an idea.
That gives us indeed a good idea, Sarah, particularly the point you mentioned about making sure that the innovation is also connected to KPIs and strategies. In which moment, and actually I'm seeing a question from the audience that kind of relates to the question I wanted to ask. They say, how do you manage to introduce innovative projects or innovation projects within existing roadmaps? At what stage of the process, I would say as well, do you link them to the KPIs? Do they come before, after? What adapts to what?
Well, the way we work is, and that's then more on a strategic level, that is that we have like sort of an innovation funnel where we look at which are the companies we want to collaborate mostly with, and then we try to get the most important stakeholders within our company together with the ones from the other company. We look at the priorities in both companies, we set them together, and then when we have decided which these are, we go looking at who are the teams that are working on these topics, and we bring these together as well, and then we check every time. And it's at these moments that we can see, and it depends every time, it's differently in another project, then we're like setting, okay, where are we, at which stage are we, what do we want to reach, what are these KPIs? So sometimes it's early in the process because we're early in researching a certain topic or building a component for something, and sometimes it's much further. And it's the difficulty or the challenge is that when we are working together with someone else, we often have the same challenge, but we're not at the same level in finding that solution. So sometimes we're faster, sometimes they are. So we try to go to that same level and then build from up there. So the KPIs, it really depends. It's from topic to topic and where we are in our both organizations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sarah. Now I'd like to come to Severin here. Again, going back to the question about collaboration, who would you say are the key stakeholders that really need to be there, directly involved in innovation-related decisions? What are your key stakeholders for this collaboration to actually flow?
I think we're a bit in a special. I would say like it's still very much. Applied research projects that we're doing, and I think what we're trying to have is for all the projects. Maybe I should start by a big part of what we're doing is kind of these open access projects. So none of what we're doing in our ecosystem is exclusive to anyone. So what we always need is a big investment from multiple parties. I think this also goes a bit to, and they might be at different stages and might bring in different things, as we heard before. And for us, we're always trying to get as close as possible, and we're not always succeeding in that to the people who are actually making the decision then to whether to adopt that. And I think this is also something we can, is a lesson learned and we can still improve, is kind of closing the loop back. I think we're getting the relevant people initially when the project is initiated works nice, but then, when the project is ending, when there's results, to get the same people on board again and then take this into something.
Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned actually that for you, success is to make sure that the people will actually use what you invested in. What other ways do you have to measure success? Because in order to influence those stakeholders, you have to come with the case, you have to build the case as well. So how do you measure your success when it's about innovation?
I think for us, it's mostly two things at this point. One is more the academic side, right, where you're typically measured in terms of research output, can be publications, can be, talks can be what you're actually achieving there. The other one for us is tech transfers. So how we can move technology back. And I mean, this is a bit hard to measure because we have different forms. One part is through open sourcing our softwares that can be adopted, or it can be directly products that are getting ported. I think it's around those two things.
I'll stay still with you, Severin, and then I'll go to the other panelists. Do you think there's a trend of investing more and trusting more in innovation than there used to be, let's say, 2 years ago, when innovation was clearly a hype and a trend? Has that stayed, or has that declined, or has that increased? What do you see as a trend here?
I would say to me, it's about the same. I think what's very important and how it changes is actually more on this personal level. With these established collaborations that we have, you can build up trust, and then you can start to think bigger. So I think I also agree with maybe starting with small steps and continuing. I couldn't say that there would be a general trend. I mean, there's always these hype bubbles around a certain topic. Then everyone is probably taking more risks. And then there's kind of this cool-off phase where you realize what's actually possible. And I think that's certainly also true for an initiative like the Media Technology Center, right? You have a kind of this honeymoon phase, and then you see more clearly what is doable and what not.
Thank you. Jean-Pierre, I'll go back to you now. What do you think? Is there a trend? You actually even mentioned earlier that for you, actually, funding is not the biggest challenge. Do you see in your area, in your region, what's the trend according to you? Have people embraced more innovation, not just from a financial perspective? You said that's not the main issue for you. Are the mindsets now there more than they were 2 years ago? Or was that just a lot of conversations and trends, but in the end, people are not yet ready for the test and learn from the failures, just dare to risk and so forth as a mindset?
The first thing I would say is that innovation is getting faster and faster. So we structures have to follow this. So I don't think it's a bubble or it's a hype. It's a very deep tendency. And locally, we can see that there's more and more accelerated programs. Even in Paris, there's a lot of new companies that deals with innovation that helps corporates. I would like to mention something special for us. I think about difficulties. Previous question. One of the difficulty could be the way of communication. There's a vocabulary. There are behaviors different from startups to old companies, and we work with a company that helps us to operate the accelerator. That's an interesting idea, because there are startups that are talking to a startup that helps us on our program. I could explain more if there are questions about that. But to come back to tendencies, I think it's getting bigger and bigger, but because the innovation is getting faster and faster. If we talk about NFT, blockchain, or AI, NLP, NLG, there are so many things every day that we discover. You cannot but have resources to follow this.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Now I'll go to Johanna for the same question, and particularly, and this is something that also comes from the audience, what's the trend? What do you see as a trend? More, less, more embracement, or less, or different? And particularly, how do you think one can manage the risk of seeing cash going towards innovation that in the end is not really used? I mean, is that now more of a problem than it was before? Have we changed our mindsets there? Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that in Sweden the word innovation has been overused, and therefore people shun it because they feel it's a way of scaring away potential employees. But the fact is that we're talking about agility and learning companies instead, so I think we still mean the same thing. Everyone understands that you have to be able to quickly solve the problems that arise if you want to stay competitive. So in practice, I think innovation is still a big thing. And since the world is becoming smaller and smaller, and thoughts are moving around more rapidly, I think the pace, if you can measure it, you would find that it is increasing. Then, as I said, I don't think really that you can put innovation in part of your company and say that, okay, this is the part of the company that does innovation and the rest they just earn money. Rather that innovation is like this combination of picking up ideas from competitors and from your customers and then trying things out and then just having this learning attitude to whatever you're doing, and that is something that everyone should be doing at all level of the organization constantly. And if you start like calling it innovation, then maybe you're on the wrong track. It should just be a natural behavior that you pay attention to the information sources that matter and that you engage in ongoing discussions and that you dare to try things out. So yes, to summarize, innovation is still a big thing, though we don't call it that. And I think that maybe if you have a dedicated part that you give money just to innovate, then maybe that can create pain. But if it's just like integrated with your organization, then at least you won't see the problem that you're wasting money on innovation.
Thank you very much, Johanna. And one final question for Sarah and also for the panel. Thank you, everybody, for bringing your questions online to my phone. Sarah, a last thought about, you talk a lot about the importance of the informal moments and building the trust to make the collaboration work. You do that a lot within your region, with local companies, but you also interact with international stakeholders. Any thoughts about anything we can do to improve that interaction and collaboration at international levels?
I honestly don't feel that there's a lot of difference between having these people nearby at a national level or an international level. Sometimes, obviously, it's a culture, but other than that, and the distance, for me, it are often the same thoughts and ideas that I found that worked pretty well.
And I'm asking this question also because on the one hand, we have the challenges of the hybrid world, some of the audio issues that we had in the past, and yet COVID and this new hybrid world has given us more opportunities to interact and create dialogues with stakeholders who are sitting in completely different regions without the need to put money on a train, on a ticket and the time and the energy that requires. We can continue with the dialogues. I'm going to thank the panelists for the interesting discussion. Thank you also again, IMI, for bringing all of us together. And I encourage all of us to continue the dialogue and the discussion to make this collaboration around innovation happen at local and international level. Thank you.